Here, the Grand Ole Opry and the Ernest Tubb Record Shop, but we'd try. My very favorites on the Grand Ole Opry were the Louvin brothers. I couldn't wait for them.
To the outside world, Connie Smith was always the epitome of traditional grace in country music, a soft voice wrapped in gospel roots with a poise that commanded quiet respect. But after decades of holding her tongue, the woman once known for her gentle restraint has chosen to shatter the silence. Today, she names the 6 musicians who wounded her spirit, crossed the line, and left her with scars that no melody could ever mend. The first name, she says, still echoes in her bones: Porter Wagoner. What began as a professional pairing turned quickly into a tug of war over power. On stage, they smiled and sang in harmony, but behind the curtain, Porter's dominance turned toxic. He constantly corrected her in front of crews, overruled her creative ideas, and demanded control over song choices. Connie, still young and eager to please, was too polite to push back, but inside, resentment grew. There was a moment she remembers vividly, a rehearsal gone wrong. Porter raised his voice when she changed a phrasing he didn't approve. The band froze. She apologized, but she never forgot the look in his eyes. Not disappointment, but ownership. That night, something shifted. And from that point on, the partnership was no longer collaboration, it was captivity. But just as she thought she'd freed herself from that dynamic, she encountered another man whose arrogance stunned even her: Merle Haggard. Their paths crossed at countless country festivals and award shows, where Merle was always the swaggering outlaw, commanding rooms with a smirk. But what fans didn't see were the backstage insults, the backhanded compliments, and the subtle jabs at her faith. Once, after a gospel performance, he scoffed, "You sing that stuff like it's going to save someone." For Connie, it wasn't just disrespect, it was dismissal of everything she stood for. She tried to keep things civil, but the tension simmered. When she finally turned down an offer to collaborate with him in the early '80s, he spread whispers in Nashville that she was impossible to work with. It stung more than she let on. Still, even that couldn't prepare her for what came next. Tanya Tucker. Unlike the men, this wasn't a clash of control, but of chaos. Tanya didn't just enter the room, she stormed in like a force of nature. Young, wild, and unpredictable, she carried a kind of fire that burned everything it touched, including friendships. Connie, seasoned and cautious, saw the potential behind Tanya's recklessness and tried to guide her with kindness. She defended her in interviews, covered for her mistakes, and gave her the benefit of the doubt again and again. But Tanya's spiraling behavior, missed performances, drunken rants, explosive interviews, left more than a mess. It left everyone around her emotionally drained. Connie often found herself cleaning up the damage, calming producers, smoothing over angry fans, and apologizing for things she never caused. The pressure mounted with every excuse she made for a woman who seemed to take nothing seriously.
Of being here in this tabernacle with the people that were here that I loved so dearly and looked up to, and I was so honored to be introduced on.
The breaking point came during a televised special meant to celebrate women in country music. Tanya showed up hours late, visibly intoxicated, slurring her lines and derailing rehearsals. Connie, ever the professional, stood by her on stage and delivered her part with poise. But backstage, the mask came off. Tanya leaned in, smirking, and slurred. "You don't belong in this era with your goody two-shoes act." It wasn't just disrespect, it was a slap in the face to everything Connie had worked for. The grace, the discipline, the years of building respect in an industry that rarely offered it to women. Mocked with a drunken jab. That was the final straw. Connie walked away not in anger, but in heartbreak. Because she had hoped Tanya might grow, that the chaos was temporary. But instead she realized some storms don't pass. They just destroy everything in their path. And just when she thought she'd endured enough, another wound reopened. Waylon Jennings. They'd once shared a mutual admiration, the kind born from standing shoulder to shoulder on festival stages and watching each other from the wings. For a time, Connie believed Waylon respected her. A woman who never chased the spotlight, but owned it when she stepped in. But all of that crumbled the moment she stood her ground. When Connie refused to record a track he wrote, one she felt was degrading to women, he didn't just disagree, he exploded. "You think you're better than all of us," he spat at a crowded studio gathering, his voice slicing through the room like a blade. The atmosphere turned icy. No one came to her defense. Word of the clash spread like wildfire. Within days, she found herself quietly pushed out of sessions, her name missing from upcoming invites, her contributions suddenly overlooked. Waylon, with his outlaw image and growing fan base, only seemed to benefit from the drama. Connie, by contrast, was labeled difficult, uncooperative, overly righteous. She never fought back publicly. She didn't write songs to throw punches, but privately, the sting festered. It wasn't just the insult, it was the fallout, the realization that standing up for her values would cost her opportunities. To this day, she says, he mistook dignity for arrogance. But deep down, she also knows he underestimated her strength, because what he saw as defiance was really survival. Then came the most unexpected betrayal, Dolly Parton. They were never best friends, but they were peers who once held each other in high regard. For years, Connie had admired Dolly's rise, her songwriting, her strength. There was even a kind of unspoken bond between them, a quiet respect shared by two women who had each fought to carve out space in a male-dominated world. But all of that changed during a pivotal award season in the late 17s. Connie, nominated for a prestigious honor, had every reason to feel proud. Until one evening, tucked behind velvet curtains, she overheard Dolly laughing with a group of executives. The words stung like ice water. Connie's church girl image would never win over the modern crowd. "They want sparkle, not sermons," Dolly had said with a smirk. It wasn't just a slight, it was a bullet, one aimed at her identity, her core, the very thing that made her music different. Connie smiled when their paths crossed later that night. She even offered congratulations. But something in her cracked. It wasn't just about the comment. It was about realizing that even those who should have had her back could turn their words into weapons. That night, Connie went home and cried, not from anger, but from disillusion. For all the talk of sisterhood in country music, here was proof that women too could feed the machine that dismissed softness as weakness and faith as irrelevance. She never confronted Dolly. She never had to. The wound was deep enough without a word. And it taught her something that night, that betrayal doesn't always come with a roar. Sometimes it slips in, smiling, and leaves behind a silence that echoes for years. And finally, the one name she reveals with both hurt and heartbreak, Marty Stuart. They were supposed to be partners, husband and wife, equals in music and in life. But Connie admits now, even the deepest love doesn't guarantee mutual respect. In private, Marty often questioned her relevance, nudging her toward a glossier, more modern image that felt like a betrayal of everything she'd built. He urged her to be more commercial, to abandon the raw gospel roots that defined her, and even joked that she should stick to hymns because that's all people expect from you now. At first, Connie tried to ignore the remarks. She convinced herself they were offhand comments, not signs of something deeper. But the cracks in their artistic bond widened. Marty began to treat her legacy like something outdated, a relic rather than a foundation. She tolerated the comments until one moment made her question everything. During a private dinner with executives, Marty introduced her with a smirk as the legend who refuses to evolve. Everyone laughed. Connie did too, but inside something withered. It was the sound of a pedestal being pulled out from under her by the very man who had promised to lift her up. After that night, the tension between them shifted from subtle to soul-crushing. Conversations became colder. Creative decisions turned into battles. She began to wonder if love alone was enough to keep two hearts aligned. She says the love remained, but so did the silence. And sometimes silence can be the most painful betrayal of all, because it doesn't shout, or break things. It just lingers, slowly eroding the ground beneath your feet, until there's nothing left to stand on. Connie Smith never set out to be a rebel. She wanted only to sing pure, honest, gospel-touched songs that came from the heart. But time, truth, and betrayal changed her. The sweet ballads turned into silent screams, the harmony into armor. Today, her voice doesn't just sing, it testifies. Against the double standards that silenced her, against the quiet humiliations suffered backstage, against the deep wounds that smiled for the camera while bleeding just out of frame. She doesn't name names to seek revenge, she names them to reclaim space, to rewrite her legacy in ink too bold to erase, to remind the world that even angels can bleed, and that grace doesn't mean submission. She's done hiding behind politeness, done swallowing tears to keep the peace, done carrying the weight of others' cruelty with a quiet smile. Now, every note she sings is a reckoning, a roar that rises from the ashes of all she endured. And now, the reckoning echoes through every song she ever sang, with more fire than ever before, not to burn bridges, but to light the truth.